Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to the month in review for September. It's been a busy month and a lot has happened, so let's dive in, starting off with the painting competition submissions. So, starting off in the solo category, our first entry is from Bowties and Bugbear. That's an interesting name. But we've got ourselves here a dwarf musician, lots of attention to the detail, very, very bright colors, and as always, nice job on the bass. So, excellent work here. Moving on to Get Safe, yo. Okay. I like this one. Look at this. We've got like a steampunk, very, very dark, like grimdark steampunk. And I love the way that he's added the flames at the end of the barrel, in the eyes, on the backpack, to kind of show the idea that this thing is just burning from the inside. And it's just it's like a boiler that's about ready to explode. Very dark, very grim, but still looks really nice. Jacko Cipolla has given us a very colorful orc here, and he's even a blonde. How do you like them apples? But good job painting all of the details. You can see specific highlights there on the pants. Everything has been given some attention. You look closely, there's not a lot of paint like spilling over into other areas, which everyone notices is when they paint stuff at 3 feet, it looks fantastic. And when you get close, you can notice some things that have crossed over a little bit. But this one looks pretty clean as far as that goes. So nice job to Jacko. Jetmark Genantian. And apologize to anyone if I butcher your names here. So my first reaction is look at the skin. Look how smooth that blend is. And I don't think that's with an airbrush. I think that's with just a very, very steady hand. Look at the blade. You can see the reflection of the red monster underneath on the under part of the blade. I mean, this is a beautiful piece. The only thing that surprises me a bit is the blue rim. Maybe that's to help separate units in combat or what have you, but I'm always a big fan of either going with black or with a color that matches the terrain. So on this one, you could do a dark green or a dark brown or muddy or something like that. But I have a sneaky feeling this one is going to take first place, if not at least make the top 3. Kai Tucker also has a beautiful piece. Look at this. The way that the colors on the monster there are blending from the darker to the lighter. You have everything, beautiful attention to detail. That banner, I haven't painted any of the orc banners, so I don't know if that's freehand or if that's actually on the banner, but I do believe that skull on there is freehand. And you can see how it goes from the lighter yellow at the bottom down to a darker red at the top. So now I'm torn whether this one would take first or that previous one. Both of them absolutely fantastic. All right, moving on to Mera. We have a nice display model. Like, look at that base to it. That's a diorama. And they even have the cool OnePageRules thing at the bottom there. Look at the non-metallic metal on the shields. Absolutely beautiful. Love how you have the object source lighting coming from the base where the runes are glowing, but it actually highlights and illuminates the entirety of the base. So my goodness, 3 in a row. These might be our first, second, and third. Michael Taylor has given us another dwarf piece here, going for very, very heavy metallic. And it's tricky to do metallic on metallic and still have it pulled off. For some reason, metallic paints, they don't usually go together too well. You got to have something to break them up in between, like a wash or a non-metallic color, something like that. This one looks pretty decent here. Mini Painters has given us the exact same model, but this one is more the non-metallic scheme, or at least it's a metallic but highlighted very interestingly. So the shield, like the brass, is definitely metallic paint, but I think the gray instead is painted simply to look like a silver. Really good attention to detail. Nice, like look at the way that the runes, the edgings and the detail on the armor are dark enough that they really, really stand out, especially when you then have that highlight right next to them to really give you that contrast. And nice variety on the base there. You've got different kinds of snow, or is that snow flowers? You've got rocks, you've got grass. You even got a little bit of object source lighting, if I'm not mistaken, on his foot on the left there. Subscrub. Looks like a quest model. Nice and solid, bright colors, solid clean paint job, and kudos to taking a picture with, making it look like it's in a scenario there. Obviously, when people take pictures in more the studio look, where it's like the black screen behind them or something, that always looks good too. But I do appreciate when players try and take the photo of their model to make it immersive as part of a narrative. Architecture AI. We see a lot from the Architecture AI, and this is an excellent piece as well. So we've got the skin. It looks like the orc skin here would be very, very fun to paint. The nice, like the curves, the contrast, the details make it easy to know where to highlight and where to have shadow while still making it look pretty good. Excellent job. Also, nice contrasting colors. You got the bright orange, the bright green from the orc skin, and then you've got the red for the fur and the feathers on the creature, and then you have a beige underneath. So in terms of color, there's a lot to look at here, and really cool scenic base. Weasel Boy, we're back to another dwarf warrior here, the Steampunk Warriors. Fairly simple scheme. We got a couple colors, looks like a lot of dry brushing on it to give it some highlighting. So you still have the detail, but this looks like a paint scheme that could be done very, very quickly. And that looks like it's it for the solo categories. So let's jump over now and take a look at units. So first up in the unit category is Big Papa Tacos, who demonstrates here very nicely how simplicity can still look good. I imagine, I don't know if it was with an airbrush or a rattle can, but you could base coat the entirety of these models in about 10 seconds. And then with a wash and some good dry brushing and then a little bit of edge highlighting, you've got a single color, but there's enough variety and lighting and shadow that it still looks really awesome. And then, of course, you put the flame in the little grating on their faces there. And then at mid-armor there, you can see those little details that are painted a different color as well, just to give it some variety. But for the most part, that's what you kind of expect a golem to look like. Not super duper colorful. So excellent job taking a simple paint scheme and making it look solid. All right, next up, David D., who we see quite a bit here. And we've got some more dwarves. Excellent job here. I'm trying to decide if this was layered, contrast, speed paint. I mean, look at the banner there. How you can see very distinct green highlights on the raised areas and darker green on the recesses. Excellent use of color. You got the nice blue accent that kind of breaks up all of the green that you see on the rest of it. And then you have the brown from the wood. So lots and lots of colors coming together here, but it doesn't clash. It looks really nice. And I'm always a big fan of the lava base, where you paint the base in oranges and reds and yellows, and then you paint that crackle paint, and when it dries, it cracks, and it makes it look like you're standing on lava. I did that with my war demons. So nice job to David. All right, Demi-Deviant, so only partially deviant. We've got ourselves the dwarf, the name's eluding me, but everyone's painting them here, like the steam warriors, the steam suits. Very interesting choice of colors. We're going strong contrast here. You have like a yellow-green, almost a lime, and then a very strong blue. So it gives you a very stark contrast. It makes them actually look cold. And then you look at the skin for the dwarves. It's also painted a very pale, light colors for the hair. It almost like is this contrast, instead of feeling like heat from a furnace, that these guys are somehow frozen. So it's a very interesting take on it. Nice, clean paint job. Excellent. All right, Eric53 has given us a unit of Orc Riders. And again, I love the way that there's a nice mix of contrast, and I also love how lots of folks are experimenting with different skin tones for the orcs. Green is typically what everyone goes with, and it still always looks good. But we had that one in the solo, that was blue. Here we've got kind of a brown. But the contrast with the green of the beasts that they're riding looks really nice. And the bases look solid too. So nice job to Eric. All right, Loki 100. Here we get another example of how these golems can be almost monochrome, like one solid color instead of the brass for the previous one. We have a metal here. But as long as you paint enough subtle highlights and accents and you have some shadow, they still look good. They don't look like you just took them, spray painted or base coated them in silver and then stuck them on the table. There's enough variety to give them some depth. All right, Lewis Thunder Badger. We got another batch of tan or darker brown skin orcs, and these have a lot of really nice detail. They look very dusty, very dirty, but in a good sense. It looks like a lot of dry brushing here on the skin and the pants just to catch those highlights, but you can take a look. The skin, the muscles are very, very defined, but yet you still have that blue accent with the cloth. Take a close look at the blades that the guy in the top right has, and you can actually see the electrical, the lightning kind of effect that was painted on all of those claws. So you have these really dark, earthy tones with the orange-brown skin and then the darker brown pants, but then you have the blue cloth and the blue claws mixing it up a bit. So this is a really, really good-looking army, or unit, sorry. Michael Coetzee. Again, apologies if I get the name wrong. Big fan of dioramas, folks, because it's not easy to do them. It is a lot of work. It may look like, well, you just put together some rocks and trees and paint it neutral colors. It's a lot tougher than it looks. That's why I usually never do it. I'm too lazy. So nice job here where we've got the nice earthy tones being offset by the bright gold shoulder pads, and then having the lanterns, the lights on the shields and the lantern being super, super bright to set it off. And it's just a nice, solid, earthy paint scheme. Michael Griffin. Now here we've got some dark gray orcs, which gives them kind of like almost like these are the orcs that stay in the caves and haven't seen light for too long. But I like the overall kind of darkness that they have to them. Even though the pants are like this purplish red, they're a very, very subdued purplish red. So you don't have these super dark-skinned gray scale orcs with super bright red pants. That might look a little bit off. So nice job. And T. Doyer HR. I'm sorry. I'm just going to fail on this one here. So we have a bit of a change. We have the dwarf steam suits. Something about the heads. I think these are all clean shaven, which is very, very interesting. Looks like a use of a speed paint or a contrast, at least for the armor. But it looks like it was painted over a silver or metallic base coat, so it's shiny, but it's still colored. So a different way to do it here, and then painting the, not the webbing, but the black area, the connecting pieces of the armor, so that the focus is on the red of the armor there. All right, so that's it for the unit categories. I'm guessing, let's see, what are going to be on the winner's podium? I believe this one is going to probably take first. This one's pretty good. So is that one. And I'm not trying to poop on those who don't, but everyone starts somewhere, and some people who've been painting longer get more. So I think Big Papa Tacos, I think Eric, and probably Lewis here are going to be our top three. To everyone else, though, no shade on you. Okay, moving on to the Army category. Ooh, now this is different. Oliver O'Neill has given us some bright red orcs with a very contrasting green. We got the Ninja Turtle van back there. We got the massive Titan in the background. Like, this is solid. The only thing you need to add to it, Oliver, is something on the bases so they're not all black. Now, the tricky thing is what to put there, because you've got so much color on the models. I would say either go with like a gray, since you have so many reds and browns, you have warm colors. So if you do like rocky gravel, gray as the base, that will be a nice contrast for it. It might render, I think the guns aren't going to ruin that too much. But look at how much attention to the detail here. Like on the van, everything has been painted. All the pipes, the rims, the details. So really solid. Very, very colorful. Obi-Wan Kenobi has given us our orcs. So again, we have a very muted, very dusty looking orcs here. Back to the original green skin, but with a dark blue or dark purple hair. It looks pretty good. This is great for a starter army, of course, unless this is skirmish. If it's skirmish, this is perfect. You want to play this in Grimdark Future, you're going to need some vehicles and walkers. But I can see a lot of hard work put into these guys here, so nice job. Okay, Party Bear Minis. Now, Party Bear always likes to do these really, really bright, almost psychedelic-like paint schemes. But excellent job contrasting purple and blue. And then look how he's done the highlighting on all the metal panels to really make the bends in the armor stick out. So these look fantastic. And then, of course, with the tufts and the really, really bright flora and fauna on the bases, I do believe this one here is definitely going to make the podium. All right, your average painter. Is that humility or a declaration? Who knows? But yellow is hard to work with. So nice job picking something that's going to be tough right from the outset. And it's a nice complete army. We've got double walkers, we've got vehicles, we've got the jet bikes, we've got different kinds of infantry. Like, this is a full complete army. Probably, I don't know, what, 3,000, 4,000 points? You'd be able to mix this up if you were to play a 2,000 point game all the time. And as always, excellent putting in just a little bit of terrain. You got the barbed wire, you got the building here, so that it looks more organic. It looks like you're painting a scene or taking a photograph of a scene and not necessarily just a portrait. So I think your average painter is going to be one of the winners. I think Party Bear Minis is going to take first place. And then as far as other, it's hard to say because each of these are very, very unique. You got bright contrasting here, and then you have muted contrasting here. So I'm not quite sure. I am not quite sure. All right, folks, so there are the entries for the September painting competition. Let's go take a look at the news. Of course, jumping over to news, one of the biggest bits for September is the release of the 3.5 beta for all Army books in Grimdark Future and Age of Fantasy. Now, personally, I've certainly enjoyed trying out all the different armies, different units, different builds. I've only got through maybe a quarter of them, but I've really had fun testing out the new rules and trying out different combinations with units and themed builds around armies, instead of just taking stuff that will benefit. You have some melee here, you have some shooting here. I've been trying to create armies with an overall theme. Like, this army is a fast reaction force, so lots of speed, lots of melee, whereas I've tried another army that's meant more of like long-range support, so lots of firepower and things like that, and I've had a good time with it. So I'm sure everyone has been enjoying this as much as I have, hopefully. At the same time, I think the pace of change was a little too much. I'm sure we've all had the experience where you created an army list that morning, and then by the time you get to your game that evening, the rules have changed, which means your army build is no longer viable, and you've had to start over. Now, Tano has announced that the changes are going to be less frequent and more scheduled as we go into the second half of the beta. So hopefully things will calm down a little bit. I have noticed, though, that some of the armies, for example, the Dao Union, have had very little alteration in their special rule. I think only one change, and it was a tweaking of the rule rather than a dramatic change. Whereas other armies, like for example my Havoc Brothers and the Prime Brothers, have had very significant changes. Some that were way too overpowered, and others that were kind of throwaway because they weren't that good. And so I know some players have actually said they're just going to hold off until the beta is over and either play the pre-beta rules or play an army that isn't changing so frequently until everything is done and it's settled, and then they'll explore. Because let's be honest, it does kind of suck to see a new rule that you're excited about, you build an army around it, you play a game, you win, you're super excited, and then that rule changes and you're never going to be able to play that army that way again. So I can understand how that can get a little bit frustrating. However, the frequency of the changes does show that OnePageRules is listening to the players. Now, having said that, though, OPR is not a democracy. So while I appreciate that OPR is gathering feedback and then trying to act on feedback, you do not want to try and crowdsource the beta. It's his project. He gets to ultimately make the decision, and I'm glad he's taking in comments and feedback from players, but hopefully it won't get out of control. That's all I'm saying here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the second half of the beta. Now, one other thing that I'll say is that when I was doing my recent video about that massive Reddit thread asking the question, why isn't OPR bigger, why hasn't it dominated, one of the comments that I saw repeatedly, and I talk about this in the video, is a lot of folks said the armies felt the same, that there wasn't a lot of distinction other than models and paint jobs, but as far as rules, it felt like playing the same army with just a few changes here and there. I think that what's happening with the beta is going a very long way to address that problem. And the final comment that I'll make, and this might get some pushback, in fact, I'm pretty sure it will, because this does stick a toe in the realm of what 40K has done in the past. I just think 40K went the wrong direction with it, and I think OPR might be able to do it right. And my suggestion is this. Since we've had so many different army special rules, some of them have been good, some not so good, some have had different applications, why not have 2, maybe 3 army special rules for each army that the player can pick one of and apply to that specific build. So you could have one special rule that emphasizes movement and mobility. You could have one that's more melee focused. You could have one that's more morale focused, just as examples. I mean, there's lots of them as we see. We saw with the release of the Human Defense Force models from OPR that they had a goal of creating army files that had 3 distinct categories or flavors to them. So for example, in the HDF, you could have humans, like human individuals, or you could have an army of robots and drones. And when we went to the Wood Elves, you could have the elves, you could have the bugs, you could have entirely different like aesthetics to it. So why not have multiple army-wide rules to match that? So maybe you want to play HDF and you want to play all humans, and the theme behind it is these are like your frontline troopers who never run away, and so you take the special rule that gives them additional morale boosts. Or you're going to take an army that's mostly drones, and because of that, you're going to give them a boost that increases their to hit or something like that. You get what I'm saying? It allows players to have more variety, not just in between army books. The HDF are now very different from the Prime Brothers, but now you could have 2 HDF players that are very, very different from each other. So I think it could work. For example, while testing out my Havoc Brothers, I really enjoyed the few days where the rule was +1 AP when inside 12 inches, or when charging. So I built an army that was mostly short-range weapons and melee, and until I got in close, my army was totally useless, but then once they got in close, they were devastating. And then that was taken away, and I was kind of sad about that. But then they got the rule that allows them to ignore being shaken on a 4+. And that's a really useful rule that would allow you to play with any kind of army. You could have a melee focus, you could have nice balanced combined arms, you could have a range focus, and that rule would still be useful. So it's almost like that would be your default rule if you're not sure. And as you play the army and realize, I really like having melee ambushers, then you switch to the +1 AP within 12 inches. So it would allow each army not to just be unique from other armies in the game, but it would allow tons of variety inside a single army book. You could have different builds, you could have different play styles within each army. So that's my 2 bits. I'm curious what you guys think about it. The other massive bit of news for September is that the GameFound campaign for Broken Truth launched and funded in about 17 minutes. It's not a record, but that's still pretty darn good. Now, I did a video previously looking at the various tiers and costs of the Broken Truth campaign, and I did end up backing the campaign myself. So next year, early to mid next year, you can expect to start seeing Bat Reps using actual OPR minis. I know, I'm shocked too. And no, I did not get that giant Saurian statue. I thought it looked nice, but it's a bit too much money for something that's basically going to be a decoration. I mean, sure, it'll look fantastic, like in a gaming store as one of the pieces you put on top of the cooler on the counter, or just something where it's looming over the whole room. Or, I suppose, you could also paint it up to look like stone, and it could be a major centerpiece of terrain. Like, imagine a table that's all kinds of jungle, and then you have this humongous Saurian statue in the middle, acting, like this godlike statue overseeing the whole tabletop. That'd be pretty cool as well, but it was like $200, and that was just a little too much. Especially when for that much, I could get a good head start on another army. So I did back it, but not at the tippity top tier. Now, what surprises me a little bit about Broken Truth is that when it first released, I did a informal poll on the channel and asked, who's backing it, what level are you backing it? And what surprised me, one, is the number of responses. I got over 300 comments, which for me is pretty good. And that the majority of respondents, about 60%, said they weren't going to buy in at all. The option was, I'm going to give this one a miss. And about 60%, at least the last time I looked at the poll, had picked that one. Now, in the comments, some said they really didn't love the models. Others said that they thought that all the tiers were a bit too expensive, and all those are valid reasons. I was just surprised that it wasn't more people getting involved in it. So I thought that was very fascinating. Okay, well, believe it or not, there's only one other item. But then again, the fact that you have Broken Truth and you have the the release of the beta, those are pretty big items, and they've been taking up most of OPR's time. So the only other item is that there's a new compatibility creator to showcase. So in case you're new to the channel or unfamiliar with that, what that is, a compatible creator is an STL designer that has either made their own line of STL files and then created an Army book and OPR to match, or they've taken an existing OnePageRules Army book and they've created models for that entire book. So maybe they took, for example, well, I'll think of like the Tau Union. You could play 40k Tau, or some STL creator may have made their own Tau Union models. You get the idea there. So this month's creator is FlowShape. Now, it's pretty clear that this project was designed, if not initially, definitely eventually, for use in Trench Crusade. So if you're not familiar with Trench Crusade, it's a recently released game that's a cross of the medieval Crusades and the First World War that literally pits the forces of heaven and hell on Earth. So it's been putting a lot of stuff in together here. And you look at these models, they are absolutely meant to be played in Trench Crusade. Now, I'm not meaning this as a criticism. What they've done is they've taken these Trench Crusade models, added some extra units on top so that now you can play it as a OPR army and not just a Trench Crusade warband. I think the minis actually look pretty good. They're like this curious blend of Asian, Middle Eastern, and Western. So you have, for example, the kunai, the knife from that a ninja would carry. The kind of the layered armor is very reminiscent of a samurai, whereas the Blade Masters, they have that armor that looks more like a Byzantine cataphracti. And then you have the helmets on the infantry that look like something that a British soldier wears in World War I. So what you have then are models that are geographically fluid, shall we say. You could paint them up to look more European, more Middle Eastern, more Far Eastern, mostly Japanese. That all depends on the player. And then these models are designed to be used in Trench Crusade or OPR. So what I'm wondering, if this is going to become a more common theme among STL creators, making files that are fluid between games and aesthetics. And it's a very difficult tightrope to walk. Making models that can fit in multiple games, that's not too difficult, but to try and make an aesthetic that's that fluid, you run the risk of creating just vanilla ice cream, which, while good, nobody wants just vanilla ice cream. So I wonder if the fact that model-agnostic games and 3D printed models are becoming a much bigger part of tabletop gaming, if this is where designers are headed, to try and make STL designs that are intentionally broad so that they can fit in multiple different games and multiple different aesthetics. I think it's the kind of creative format and even business model that we might start to see more of. And whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think that's up to the STL creators themselves. So then, that's it for the review for the month of September. Make sure to leave a comment down below about what you thought about the beta, about Broken Truth, about the painting entries, or anything else that we covered in the video. And until next time, keep your dice on the table.